Question 1. The graph above shows the Chen family's water usage over 40 weeks. During which of the following periods was the family's water usage above 750 gallons per week? So gallons per week is on the y-axis, and they just want to know when was it above 750. I'm going to draw a line at 750. Clearly it was above somewhere between 20 to 28. So let's look at the choices, and just a quick glance shows that C is the closest. Question 2. The distance between two locations on a map is 6 centimeters. If 1 centimeter on the map corresponds to an actual distance of 15 miles, what is the actual distance in miles between the two locations? So here you just need a simple proportion. They're telling us that the scale is 1 centimeter equals 15 miles, and they want us to figure out how many is 6 centimeters. So just cross multiplied, 6 times 15 is going to be 90, and that's the answer. Question 3. A store received a shipment of 1,000 MP3 players, 4 of which were defective. If an MP3 player is randomly selected, what is the probability that it is defective? So it's basically 4 out of 1,000. And here they're just testing your ability to translate that into decimals. 4 thousandths is choice A. Question 4. The function f is defined above. What is the value of f of 20? So that basically means we're plugging in 20 for x. So you can just write it out. That becomes 20 plus 0.25 times 20. And that all is multiplied by 50 minus 20. So if you can do this in your head, it might be a little bit faster. 1/4 of 20 is 5. Add that to 20, and it really becomes 25 times 50 minus 20 is 30. And the answer to that is going to be choice C, which is 750. Question 5. Which of the following expressions is equivalent to that? So really, you just have to multiply this out. Don't forget to distribute. So 2 times AB becomes 2AB. 2 times -3 becomes -6. And then we're going to add that to 2. So -6 plus +2 is obviously -4. And so it becomes 2AB minus 4. And B is your answer. Number 6, what number is 20% greater than 60? So if you're using your calculator, the absolute fastest way to do this is multiply 60 by 1.20, because that takes into consideration the fact that you're adding 20 onto the original. And so the answer is going to be 72. If you were to do it a little slower, you could multiply 0.2 by 60, and you're going to get 12, and then add that onto 60. That could work also. And if you're going to do it in your head, then just remember 20% is 1/5. So 60 divided by 5 is 12, and just add that onto 60. Either way, you're going to get 72, and that's the answer. Question 7. The graph of y equals 3x minus 5 is a line. What is the slope of the line? So really, this is just, you have to look at it, and if you recognize that y equals mx plus b, m is always going to be the slope. That's +3, and that's the answer. Question 8. A system of equations consists of a quadratic equation and a linear equation. Obviously, the parabola is the quadratic, the linear is the line. The equations in this system are graphed on the xy plane. How many solutions does it have? So solutions to a system basically means where do the graphs intersect, and it's going to be in 2 points, there and there. So the answer is 2. And that's usually the case for a linear or a line and a parabola, unless of course the line touched exactly on the vertex, then it would be 1 solution, or if the line were below the parabola, then it could be 0 solutions. Question 9. A tree had a height of 6 feet when it was planted. The above equation can be used to find out how many years n it took the tree to reach a height of 14 feet. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the number 2? So if you solve for n, you would subtract 6 from both sides. You get 2n equals 8 divided by 2. N is actually going to be equal to 4. And that tells you how many years it took the tree to reach 14 feet. But perhaps more helpful in this case is notice that there's a 6 here and a 6 there. So if you're looking at just this part of the equation, this can be used as a function to tell you what the height is after n number of years. So let's plug in different numbers for n and see what the height was. So when n equals 1, the height was going to be 2 plus 6 is 8. That's in the first year. When n equals 2, it's 2 times 2 is 4 plus 6 is 10. When n equals 3, it's going to be 6 plus 6 equals 12. And then when n equals 4, it's going to be 8 plus 6 equals 14. So this is really just to help us get an idea of what is going on with this number 2. And it seems that for every year, we're adding 2 more feet to the height of the tree. All right, so let's look at the answer choices. Choice A, the number of years it took the tree to double its height. So remember when we first planted the tree, the height was 6. And then how long did it take to get to 12? It actually took 3 years because that's the number that we worked out. So A is not going to work. B, the average number of feet that the tree grew per year. So that does make sense because notice that our numbers increased by 2, 8, 10, 12, 14. So B seems like it's going to work. C, the height in feet of the tree when it was 1 year old. Definitely not, because when you plug in 1 for n, the height is 8, not 2. Choice D, the average number of years it takes similar trees to grow 14 feet. Well, assuming that similar trees grow at this rate, that's actually not true, because notice that we said that we started from 6 and we went to 14, and that happened in over 4 years, not 2 years. So that's also off, and B is your best answer. Question 10. Residents of a town were surveyed to determine whether they are satisfied with the concession stand at the local park. A random sample of 200 residents was selected. All 200 responded, and 87% said that they were satisfied. Based on this information, which of the following statements must be true? So for the SAT on these types of questions, all you really have to concern yourself is whether the sample was actually random. And if the sample is random on the SAT, whatever is true for the 200 residents is also going to be true for the larger group in general. If, on the other hand, we were talking about a sample of people who were standing at the concession stand, that would suggest that it's not a random sample, because, logically you would think the people standing at the concession stand are probably more satisfied, which might be why they're there, versus people who might have gone there in the past and are now not there anymore or no longer going. So just keep that in mind. And so let's go through the choices. Of all the town residents, 87% would say they're satisfied with the concession stand at the local park. So again, given that this was random, given that all 200 responded, you have the same percentage, and that seems to be okay as far as the SAT goes. Point 2, and by the way, we can eliminate choices A, C from there. Point 2, if another random sample of 200 residents were surveyed, 87% would say that they are satisfied. So this actually is not going to be true, because given that it is a random sample, you would expect some variation from the number 87. And so we can eliminate choice 2, and therefore the answer is going to be B. Question 11. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals x plus 3 intersects with the graph of y equals 2x minus 6. At point AB, what is the value of A? So a couple ways you could do this. You could attempt to draw a rough sketch of these two graphs, noting what the slope is and the y-intercepts, and trying to approximate where they intersect. Another method would be to plug in each of the answer choices and see which number gives you the same value of y when you plug it in for x. I think, though, the fastest way to do this is really just to set the equations equal to each other, because the algebra is so easy. So if they intersect at one point, that means at that given value of x and y, they're going to be equal to each other. So I'm going to set the whole equation of each equal to each other, add 3 to both sides, subtract x from both sides, we get 9 equals x, and that's going to be the answer. Question 12. Which of the following could be the equation for the line of best fit for the data shown in the scatter plot? So you can start by drawing a line that looks like it approximates most of the data. So you want to try to hit as many points as possible. That's not very straight, but you guys can probably do better. So rather than trying to derive an equation just based on the look of the line, I'd say look at the answer choices and start to eliminate choices. So the first thing I'll notice is that because this is oriented from left to right and it's increasing, the slope is going to be positive. So I'm going to eliminate choices C and D based on the fact that they have negative slopes. And again, these are all in y equals mx plus b form, so they make it pretty easy for us. Between choices A and B, we've got different slopes and different y-intercepts. I don't really trust the accuracy of my line. Is the y-intercept more like 0.8, which is close to 1, or is the y-intercept 3? That to me is too risky to actually guess, so I'm going to try to figure out which slope is more accurate. I'm going to pick 2 random points that look easy. So I'll go there and I'll go here. And we're going to calculate the slope by calculating rise over run, change in y over change in x. So here we're looking at 25 minus 5 is 20. And you're going to subtract 8 minus 1, which is 7. So 20 divided by 7 is around 3, which tells me that this is going to be the more accurate slope as opposed to 0.8. And so A is the answer. Question 13, you've got this equation. What is the solution to the equation above? So they're giving you x values. So there's a few different ways you could do this. You can just eyeball it and recognize that, hey, they're both being squared both sides. So I can ignore that. And I'm looking for a number that 8 minus that number equals the same as 4 plus that number. So what's that number going to be? Think about the midpoint between 8 and 4 is 6. So how do you get to 6? It's going to be 8 minus 2 is going to be the same as 4 plus 2, which is 6. So that tells you rad x is equal to 2, and therefore x is going to be equal to 4 when you square both sides. So if you didn't see that immediately, you could also just go through each answer choice and plug in these values for x until you get to the one that works, which is going to be choice B. On the other hand, if you didn't think of any of that, you could also just do it algebraically, very straightforward. So take the square root of both sides. You're left with 8 minus rad x equals 4 plus rad x. And you're going to subtract 4 from both sides, which is going to give you 4. Add rad x to both sides. So you're going to get 2 rad x on that side. Divide both sides by 2. That's going to give you 2 equals rad x. Square both sides. X is going to be equal to 4. And it gets you your same answer. So out of those three methods, whichever one was fastest to you and whichever one makes the most sense, that's the best one to do. Question 14. A fish hatchery has 3 tanks for holding fish before they're introduced into the wild. 10 fish weighing less than 5 ounces are placed in tank A. 11 fish weighing at least 5 ounces but no more than 13 ounces are placed in tank B. 12 fish weighing more than 13 ounces are placed in tank C. Which of the following could be the median of the weights in fishes or in ounces of these 33 fish? So we want to get this into an organized pattern. So I'm just going to write very quickly. Less than 5 ounces is going to be the 10 fish in tank A. Tank B is going to have at least 5 and no more than 13. So keep in mind that's greater or equal to, and that has 11. Tank C has more than 13, and there are 12 fish there. So they want to know the median of the weights in ounces in these 33 fish. So the median is going to be the 17th element, but that doesn't really matter because you know that the middle number is going to be within this group because they're pretty evenly distributed. So you need an answer choice that is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13, or anywhere in between. The only one that fits that is choice B, which is 8, and that's the answer. Question 15. In triangle ABC, the measure of angle A is 50. If triangle ABC is isosceles, which of the following is not a possible measure of angle B? All right, so an isosceles triangle has 2 angles that are the same. So you want to draw out the 2 possibilities. Either angle A is up here, and that's 50 degrees. Given that a triangle adds up to 180 degrees, when you do the math, these 2 become 65. The other possibility is that angle A is one of the base angles, and so you've got 50 here, 50 here, and then when you do the math, this angle is going to be 80. So really the possibilities for the angles of side B could be 65, 80, or 50. And that takes care of A, B, C, so you're left with D as the only option that angle B cannot be. Question 16. In the xy plane, a circle with radius 5 has center -8, 6. Which of the following is an equation of the circle? So this is an easy question if you've memorized your equation for a circle, and that's going to be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. So in this case, we've got -8, 6. This is going to be x minus -8 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals 5 squared. So that automatically should point you to choice B, and that's going to be the answer. The only potential confusing part was keep in mind that when you have a negative number, subtracting a negative means you're adding a positive. All right, 17 and 18 refer to the graph, so let's read it. According to the 2010 census, the adult population at 18 or greater in 2010 was that. In 2010, a survey was conducted amongst a randomly chosen sample 18 or older in the US about their preference to live in a warm climate or a cool climate. The table display shows a summary of the survey results. All right, so it looks like we've got in the vertical column, they separated by age, and then the choices are warm, cool, no preference with the totals. So question 17. Based on the data, which of the following is closest to the probability that a randomly selected adult who is 18 to 35 years old prefers to live in a cool climate? So 18 to 35 is here. The number of people who want to live in a cool climate is 168. The total is 508. So 168 divided by 508. And you can do that on your calculator. You're going to get about 0.3307. So the answer is going to be C. Question 18. Which of the following is closest to the difference between the percentage of adults aged 18 to 50 who responded warm and the percentage of adults 51 or greater who responded warm? So keep in mind that we're dealing with two categories because 18 to 50 is the 18 to 35 and the 36 to 50. So the percent of that group is warm over the total. We're going to have to do a total of the warm response divided by the total of all the people in that group. And then they want to compare that to the adults age 51 or greater. So that's this group, 51 to 65, as well as greater than 65. And we're going to have to do the same thing. Total all the people who preferred warm versus the total number of people in those age groups. So those are the numbers that we're comparing. The first calculation is going to be 295 plus 246 all over 508 plus 410. If you do that on your calculator, you're going to get 0.589, which translates when you multiply it by 100 to 58.9%. The second calculation is going to be 238 plus 137, all divided by 403 plus 279. You do that in your calculator, you're going to get 0.549, which translates to 54.9%. So these are the numbers that we're comparing. 58.9%, 54.9%. The difference is obviously 54% between them. So just make sure you're careful about which numbers you're adding up and then about your percentages. Question 19. Which of the following speeds is equivalent to 90 kilometers per hour? And notice all the answer choices, they're all in meters per second. So we actually have to convert two things, kilometers to meters and then hours to seconds. I think the easiest and most organized way to do this is to use conversion factors. So I'm going to start with the quantity that we have. We have 90 kilometers per 1 hour. And if we're going to convert from kilometers to meters, they're telling us that 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. We put 1,000 meters up here and 1 kilometer down here because we want not only the numbers but the units to cancel out. So we're going to multiply that together. And then also we have to convert from hours to seconds. So given that hours is down here, we'll put 1 hour up here. How many seconds is in 1 hour? 60 seconds in 1 minute times another 60. That means there's 3,600 seconds in 1 hour. So these are our conversion factors. 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer. 1 hour equals 3,600 seconds. Notice kilometers cancel out, and then hours and hours cancel out. So the units you're left with are meters per second. So when you do this on your calculator, you're going to get 90,000 divided by 3,600, and that's going to be meters per second. And the answer comes out to 25, which is choice A. Question 20. The scatter plot in the XY plane shows 9 points and a line of best fit. Of the following, which best estimates the amount by which the line underestimates the value of y when x equals 50. So let's look at that. X equals 50 down here. Go up to the line. The approximation is estimating that the y value is, this looks like about 47, 48. So we'll write 48. And what's the actual value? It's 65. So the amount that the line underestimates the actual value is the difference between 65 and 48 is going to be about 18, and choice D is the answer. Question 21. A certain elephant weighs 200 pounds at birth and gains more than 2 but less than 3 pounds per day during its first year. Which of the following inequalities represents all possible weights in pounds for the elephant 365 days after its birth? So given the fact that all the answers are a range of values, what we can do is we can calculate how much the elephant would weigh if he had in fact gained only 2 pounds per day, and if he gained only 3 pounds per day, and that should lead us to the answer. So let's do 2. He starts off at 200, and he's going to gain 2 pounds in each of the 365 days. So 2 times 365. You do that on your calculator, and you're going to get 930. That suggests that D is going to be the answer. Check it with the upper limit. He starts off at 200 pounds, gains 3 pounds per day over a course of a year. Do that on your calculator, you get 1295. So that shows that D is the answer. And notice that because it's less than, not less than, or equal to, then we're not actually including the outside values. Right, question 22. If blah, 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 what is the value of m plus 2? All right, so notice that we have m plus 2 very nicely separated on each side of the equation. So I want you to see this equation as 3 times something minus 5 equals something. Because if you simplify it like that, you very quickly know that you just have to add 5 to both sides, subtract a from both sides. You're going to get 2a equals 5, and then you can solve it. So let's do the same thing here. We've got 3m plus 2 minus 5 equals m plus 2. So we're going to subtract m plus 2 from both sides. That's going to give us 2 m plus 2's. And then we're going to add 5 to both sides. We're going to get equals 5. Now we're solving for m plus 2. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides, and we get m plus 2 equals 5 halves. Notice that we never even had to solve for m, because if you do that, it's basically a waste of time. So the answer is B, 2.5. Question 23. The dwarf planet Makemake completes one orbit around the sun every 310 years. Which of the following functions are models the number of orbits that Makemake in t years? All right, so if you're totally confused by this, just try to think about logically what's going on. If it goes around the sun once every 3 years, then when t equals 310, the orbit is going to be 1. If in the next 310 years, when t equals 620, the number of orbits you're going to have is equal to 2. So using simple numbers like this, just take these numbers for t, 310, 620, start plugging them into the equations and see which works. So for choice A, we want t to be 310. We add that to 310. The number of orbits is going to be 620, which makes no sense. We want the number of orbits to be 1. So right now we're just testing this choice. Choice B, we're going to multiply 310 times t. Well, 310 times 310 is going to give us a really large number, not 1, so that doesn't make any sense. Choice C, we're going to take 310 and we're going to divide it by 310, and that's going to give us 1. So that kind of makes sense because that's the number of orbits that we want. Look at choice D, 310 divided by 310. That also gives us 1. So for the first case, both C and D are working, so we have to try the second case. When t is 620, we want to get r of t to equal 2. So let's do the math. 620 over 310, that's going to be 2. So it looks like C is going to work. And just to double check, 310 over 620, that's going to give us 1/2, so not 2. So ultimately C is going to be the best answer. 24. If xy is a solution to the system of equations above, what is the value of 3x plus 3y? So, you always want to be looking for shortcuts. The thing that you want to notice is 7 and 4 can make 3 if you subtract it. 8 and 5 can also make 3 if you subtract them. Can you get the equations combined in a way that gets you the answer? And the answer is yes, because if you subtract the second equation from the first equation, you're going to get exactly what you're looking for. So 7x minus 4x is 3x. Negative 5y minus negative 8y is the same as positive 8y, so that becomes positive 3y. And then 4 minus 9 is going to be negative 5, and so B is your answer. You could have done this by eliminating one of the terms x or y, or you could have done this by substitution, but if you were able to see that you can get the answer just by subtracting the equations, that'll save you a lot of time. Question 25. A set of 27 different numbers has a mean of 33 and a median of 33. A new data set is created by adding 7 to each number in the original data set that is greater than the median and subtracting 7 from each number that is less than the median. Which of the following measures does not have the same value in both the original and the new data sets? All right, so I think the best way to do this is to make a simplified example. So if 33 is the mean and median of a data set, let's just use a smaller number of numbers. So let's say there's all the other numbers are 34 and all the other numbers on this direction are 32. So here we've got 7 numbers. The mean and the median is still 33. Let's see what happens when we do what they're saying to each of them. They're saying we're going to add 7 to each number that's greater than the median. So we're adding 7 to 34. So 34 plus 7 is going to be 41, 41, 41. And then it says we're subtracting 7 from each number in the original that's not the median. So subtract 7, we get 25, 25, 25. And nothing is being done to this. So let's go through the answer choices. Does the median change? No, because we haven't touched the median and we've done the same thing both to the left and right. This number still stays in the center. So A is going to be the same. B, does the mean change? Well, keep in mind what we did. We did plus 7, plus 7, plus 7. And then we did minus 7, minus 7, minus 7. That means the sum total of all these numbers is still going to be the same because all the 7s are going to cancel each other out. And we're not changing the number of elements. So the sum is going to be the same and the number of elements is going to be the same. And that's how you get your average or your mean. And so that's going to stay the same. The sum of the numbers, that's also going to stay the same because remember, for each negative 7, it gets canceled out by a positive 7. So the sum of the numbers is going to stay the same. Now the standard deviation, if you don't know what that is, you can just get it by elimination and choice D is the answer. But roughly speaking, the standard deviation is how far away each of the elements are from the middle. So let's say our standard deviation originally looked like this, some sort of a bell curve. By adding 7 to each side, what you're actually doing is you're stretching it out. And so when you calculate your standard deviation, which is that fixed percent, it's going to be a little bit larger because all your numbers are a little bit more widespread. But for this problem, you don't really have to know how to calculate standard deviation. Question 26. The function f is linear, and we're given 2 points. F of 2 is 17, f of 8 is 19. If that, where m and b are constant, what is the value of b? All right, so for this one, we want to step back and figure out what our strategy is going to be. We have 2 points. Note it's 217 and 819. They both lie on a line. And they're asking us for the value of b. So if you know your y equals mx plus b, b is always the y-intercept. So really they're asking us for the y value of this point, 0y. So this is actually not that hard to figure out because our strategy is going to be figure out the slope between our 2 known points, and then using that slope, figure out what the y-coordinate is with any of the other points. So let's do that. First of all, the slope. Let's subtract the bigger numbers, or subtract the smaller numbers from the bigger numbers. So it's going to be 19 minus 17. And you have to be consistent, divided by 8 minus 2. So that's going to be 2 divided by 6 equals 1/3. So the slope of this line is 1/3. We already know m. Now we're going to take that slope and we're going to consider 2 points. I'll use this point and this point since it's smaller numbers. So we know our slope is 1/3 and we're going to plug in 7. This time I'm going to make this one the bigger number. So we're going to say 17 minus y divided by 2 minus 0. All right, so here we can cross multiply. We get 2 equals 3 times 17 minus y. 2 is going to be equal to 3 times 17. You can do that on your calculator. It's going to be 51 minus 3y. We can add 3y to both sides. We get 3y. Subtract 2 from both sides. We get 49. And then divide both sides by 3. So y is going to be 49 over 3, which is choice C. Question 27. We have a chart. It says the results of 2 random samples of votes for a proposition are shown above. If the samples were selected from the same population and the margins of error were calculated using the same method, which of the following is the most appropriate reason that the margin of error for sample A is greater than the margin of error for sample B? So on the SAT, you will most likely not ever have to calculate the margin of error because it's a somewhat complicated equation. What you should know basically is that your margin of error tells you how far off your percent can be, either up or down. So they calculated 52% in favor in this sample. If the margin of error is 4.2%, that means the number could be as large as 56.2 or as small as 47.8, meaning to say you can add 4.2 or subtract 4.2 from 52 to get the actual percent. Same thing here, you can add or subtract 1.6 from 48% to get the margin of error. So obviously that means a smaller margin of error means a more likely accurate percent or statistic. Things that can influence that are usually sample size, and I think that's the only thing they'll ask you on the SAT. All right, so let's go through the answers. Choice A. Sample A had a smaller number of votes that could not be recorded. This is kind of a weird answer. If there were votes that could not be recorded, that would suggest that your margin of error goes up. So given that sample A had a higher margin of error, we would actually suggest, or we would actually expect that it had a larger number of votes that could not be recorded. So A is not likely the answer. Sample A had a higher percent of favorable responses. So the fact that the percent in favor is higher or lower has nothing to do with the accuracy of the percent. Those are two totally different measures. Choice B is out. C, sample A had a larger sample size. So again, larger sample size would suggest that the margin of error would be smaller. So that's kind of the opposite of what we're saying. D, sample A had a smaller sample size. That makes sense. Smaller sample size should give you a larger margin of error. So choice D is the answer. Question 28. A graphic designer is designing a logo for a company. The logo is shown in the figure above. The logo is the shape of a trapezoid and consists of 3 congruent equilateral triangles. If the perimeter of the logo is 20 centimeters, what is the combined area of the shaded region? All right, so the strategy is going to be figure out what the dimensions of the triangles are, then calculate the area of the shaded regions. If we know the whole thing is 20 centimeters and they're all equilateral congruent triangles, every part that I marked off is going to be equal. So 20 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 means that each side is 4. All right, now how's that going to help us? Let's redraw our equilateral triangle, and we'll keep in mind that each side is 4. Now, area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So one thing that's nice about an equilateral triangle is when you divide it, or when you drop an altitude, you're going to get a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So if you know your proportions, 30, 60, 90 triangle, you should have memorized 30, 60, 90 is going to be 1, rad 3, 2. And those sides correspond to the sides that are opposite those angles. So given that the base is 4, this is the small side. So the larger side that's corresponding to 60 is going to be 2 rad 3. If you get confused, just make a proportion. 1 to 2 is going to be equal to, that was our unknown, rad 3 to x. and then the larger side is just going to be double the smaller side, so that's going to be 4. So now that we have the dimensions, we can just do area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, so that's 1/2. The whole base is 4, and the height is 2 rad 3. So 1/2 4 is 2 times 2, we get 4 rad 3. That's the area of one of the triangles. So keep in mind we want the area of 2, so double that, it's going to become 8 rad 3, and choice C is your answer. Question 29. KO measured the temperature of a cup of hot chocolate placed in a room with a constant temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature of the hot chocolate was 185 at 6 p.m. when it started cooling. The temperature of the hot chocolate was 156 at 6:05 p.m. and 135 at 6:10 p.m. The temperature of the hot chocolate continued to decrease. Of the following functions, which best models the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit of the hot chocolate m minutes after it started cooling? All right, so we need to organize this into something that's intelligible. So we're calculating m as in the number of minutes when it started cooling. At the very beginning, at 6 p.m., when m was 0, the temperature was 185. After 5 minutes, at 6:05, m equals 5, the temperature dropped down to 156. And then after 10 minutes, at 6:10, the temperature dropped down to 135. So these are the numbers for m that we want to test out, and these are the numbers for t that we want to test out. Given that these equations are somewhat complicated, I would just say start testing out each answer choice and eliminate ones that don't work. On first glance, when you're looking at this, if you plug in m equals 0, anything raised to the 0 is going to be 1. So A and B look like they're going to be okay because they'll both give you 185. Choice C is actually going to be way too small because 185 minus 70 is around 115. And so you can eliminate C automatically. Choice D will also work. What's going to happen is when you're plugging in m equals 5, you're going to find that A doesn't work and B doesn't work, and that's going to leave you with D as the answer. But all that should be done on your calculator, and once you do that, you'll quickly be able to get through the answer choice because we're really only dealing with 3 sets of data points. Question 30. The equation 9x plus 5 equals a times x plus b, where a and b are constants, has no solutions. Which of the following must be true? All right, first what I'm going to notice is it helps to understand this problem better if you have it multiplied out. So 9x plus 5 is going to equal ax plus ab. So like we said before, the easiest way to tell if a problem has no solutions or infinite solutions is if you can eliminate the x terms, and then you're going to be left with either something that's always true, such as 5 equals 5, that would show that it has infinite solutions, or if you're left with a contradiction, such as 5 equals 10, then that's going to prove that no matter what values you plug in for x, the statement is still not going to be true. So let's go through each choice and see what that happens. Choice 1, so we're going to make a equal to 9, so we're going to rewrite it, 9x plus 5 equals 9x plus 9b. So notice what happens, we can subtract 9x from both sides, and then we're left with 5 equals 9b. So it does seem that in order to make the x terms drop out, we're going to have to make a 9, and then whether the statement or the equation is going to have no solutions or infinite solutions is going to depend on this value of b. So let's test out choice 2. We have 5 equals 9b, and they want us to say, does b have to equal 5 for it to have no solutions? So substitute 5. What do we get? 5 equals 45. So this does show that when b is 5, we get 5 equals 45, which is a contradiction. So that does make the equation have no solutions. But if you look at this, b can pretty much be any value. If b is 1, 5 equals 9 doesn't make sense. If b is 2, 5 equals 18 doesn't make sense. So b does not absolutely have to be 5 in order for it to have no solutions. So that's not going to work. Let's consider choice 3. Once again, we start with 5 equals 9b, and we're going to substitute 5/9 for b. We have 5 equals 9 times 5/9. Now notice what happens. The 9s divide out. you're going to get 5 equals 5, which is always true. So what does this tell us? It tells us that when b is 5/9, the statement is always true no matter what x is, because remember we subtracted out the x's. So when b is 5/9, the equation has infinite solutions. So number 3 is absolutely right that b cannot be 5/9 in order for it to have no solutions. So your answer is going to be 1 and 3 only. Question 31. The graph above models the daily profit Y in dollars that a school club expects to make from selling shirts for a price of X dollars. Based on the model, what is the maximum daily profit in dollars? So this graph actually makes sense. Most models of price versus profit are parabolas, because if you sell your item for too small of a price, you're going to lose money. If you keep increasing the price, you stand to gain more money up until the point where the item becomes too expensive and no one wants to buy it. So then you're going to end up losing money again. So if they're asking what is the maximum daily profit, that's basically the highest point on the graph. And since profit is on the y-axis, the answer is going to be 60, and that's it. Question 32. We have a formula. It says the formula gives the theoretical power P in kilowatts available from water flowing from a certain height in terms of its flow rate Q in cubic meters per second. What is the flow rate in cubic meters per second of water flowing from the same height with a theoretical power of all of that? So this is a lot of words, but really they're asking us what is Q, the flow rate, when power is a certain value. So it's really just plug in the numbers. So it's going to be 1,029,000 kilowatts equals 686, and Q is what we're solving for. Divide both sides by 686, do it on your calculator, and you're going to get 1,500, and that's going to be the answer. 33. In the xy plane above, line K passes through the points 0, 2, and 3, 0. So let's mark that down. That's 0, 2, and that's 3, 0. If the line K is defined by the equation y equals mx plus b, what is the value of b? All right, so this is a very easy equation because in a very easy problem because in the equation y equals mx plus b, b is always going to be the y-intercept. And if they've given us the coordinate of this point, then this value is 2, and that's what b is. So 2 is the answer. 34. Trevor works as a sales associate at a retail store. He's normally paid 20% of the total retail value of the merchandise he sells, but he may also earn a bonus. When he earns a bonus, he's paid an additional 15% of his normal pay. During one pay period, Trevor sold $3,500 in merchandise and earned a bonus. How much was he paid in dollars for this pay period? So I thought this was a little bit confusing when it comes to the bonus because, the question is what is his normal pay? But if you assume his normal pay is simply what he made, basically his commission, the 20% off the retail value, then the problem becomes very easy. So let's calculate that. If he sold $3,500 in merchandise, he's normally paid 20% of that. So you multiply 0.2 or 0.20 if you're thinking of 20%. Times 3,500, that's going to give you 700. So that's going to be his normal pay once he sold that much. And then for his bonus, he's going to get 15% of that. So you're going to do 0.15 to represent 15% times 700. That's going to be 105. So his total pay is going to be 700 plus 105, and that's going to be 805. And that's the answer. Question 35. A company's total cost, CX in dollars, to produce X shirts is given by the function above, where M is a constant and X is greater than 0. The total cost to produce 100 shirts is $800. What is the total cost to produce 1,000 shirts? So keep in mind what the equation is showing. We're given a relationship between the number of shirts X and their total cost with a constant that's unknown. They're giving us two pieces of information, an X number and a cost to figure out M. Once we figure out that M constant, then they're giving us a new problem to figure out what is the total cost for 1,000 shirts. So this is going to be a two-step problem. All right, so for the first step, we're going to plug in the numbers. The total cost is 800, and we're going to try to figure out M first. And it costs $800 when we have 100 shirts, plus 500. Subtract 500 from both sides, we get 300 equals 100 M. M turns out to be 3. Now that we know the unknown, we're going to use that in our to answer the question, they want to know the total cost, that's C, to produce 1,000 shirts. We know 3 is M, so just plug in 1,000 for X, plus 500, and that becomes 3,000 plus 500, which is 3,500, and that's the answer. Number 36. The total distance d in meters traveled by an object moving in a straight line can be modeled by a quadratic function that's defined in terms of t, where t is the time in seconds. At a time of 10 seconds, the total distance traveled is 50. At a time of 20 seconds, the total distance traveled is 200. And if the object was at a distance of 0 meters when t equals 0, then what's the total distance traveled in meters by the object after 30 seconds? All right, so keep in mind this is a quadratic function. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So keep in mind that in algebra, if you have 3 unknowns, you need 3 separate equations to be able to figure them out, and we do have that. So which one do we want to start out with? The easiest one is where t is equal to 0, because that's going to make the a and the b drop out. So let's plug that in. So we're going to say a times 0 squared plus b times 0 plus c, and they're telling us that the distance is 0. So a and b drop out, c also becomes 0. So now we know that the equation that we're dealing with does not have a constant. So that was our first piece of information. Now let's use our second and third pieces of information. Second piece of information is time of 10 seconds, the distance is 50. So we're going to plug that in. Distance 50 equals a times 10 squared plus b times 10. So that becomes 50 equals 100a plus 10b. Now let's look at our third situation where time is 20 and the distance is 200. So 200 equals a times 20 squared plus b times 20. That becomes 200 equals 400a plus 20b. So these are the 2 equations that I want to work with. So I'm going to rewrite them over here. All right, so I have 2 equations with 2 unknowns. I usually like to do elimination. What I'm going to notice is that I have 20b here and 10b here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top equation by 2, and then I'm going to subtract the top equation from the second. So let's multiply it by 2 first. So that's going to give us 100 equals 200a plus 20b. And I'm going to rewrite the second equation. 200 equals 400a plus 20b. I'm going to subtract the first one from the second, because then I don't have to deal with negative numbers. So 200 minus 100 is 100. 400 minus 200 is 200a. And 20 minus 20 is 0. Solve for a by dividing by 200 on both sides. We get a is 1/2. All right, knowing that a is 1/2, now I want to solve for b. So I'm going to take my easier equation. 50 equals 100 times 1/2 plus 10b. So 50 equals 50 plus 10b. Subtract 50 from both sides. I get 0 equals 10b. Divide by 10 on both sides, and I find out that b is actually 0. So this equation actually becomes something very simple. It becomes y equals a is 1/2 x squared, and there's no b term and there's no c term. So the question that they want to know is, what is the total distance traveled after 30 seconds? So all I'm going to do is plug in 30 for x. So it becomes y equals 1/2 30 squared, which is 900, and half of 900 is 450. So that's going to be the answer. A lot of steps, but as long as you keep everything separated, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Question 37 and 38 refer to the following information. For a certain computer game, individuals receive an integer score ranging from 2 to 10. The table shows the frequency distribution of the scores of the 9 players from Group A and the 11 players in Group B. So frequency distribution just tells you how often something occurs. In Group A, 1 person got a score of 2, 2 people got a score of 4, 3 people got a score of 6, and so on. So question 37 is asking the median of the scores for Group B. is how much more than the median of the scores for group A. All right, to figure out the median, we just have to list these out in order, and then we can easily see it. So one person got a score of 2, one person got a score of 3, there are 2 4s, there's 1 5, 3 6s, and 1 9. And given that this has a total of 9 elements, the median is going to be the middle, which is the 5th one. So that's going to be 5 for group A. Now let's do the same thing for group B. We're going to start with 4 5s, and then 2 6s, 2 8s, 1 9, and 2 10s. And group B has 11 numbers, so the middle is going to be the 6th, 4 5 6. So the median is 5 in group A, 6 in group B. The difference between the two is 1, and that's the answer. Question 38. The mean of the scores for group A is 5, and the mean of the scores for group B is 7. What is the mean of the scores for the 20 players in groups A and B combined? All right, so it might seem like we don't have enough information to do this, but keep in mind what the average equation is. It's your sum of the elements divided by the number, and that's going to give you your average. So look at what we know from group A. It says the mean is 5, so we have 5, and we already know the total number of students, which is 9. So therefore, to figure out the sum for group A, just multiply 9 times 5, which is 45. Group B, it says the mean is 7. And we know that group B has 11 students. So that means the sum of their scores is going to be 77. So now that we know the sum of both groups, we can find the new average. So this is going to be 45 plus 77, all divided by the total is 20. And when you do that, you're going to get about 6.1 on your calculator. And that's going to be the answer.